Welcome back, everyone. We are continuing to cover the aftermath of this horrible high school shooting in Parkland, Florida. We're now learning more about the victims. We know who they are, how many were students, how many were part of the faculty, and we're also learning more about the suspect in this case, his background, some disturbing details coming to light, and the conversation now goes to whether or not there were red flags that were missed. Vladimir Duthiers is in Parkland, Florida. Vlad, good morning.
Good morning, Emery. It's a question that a lot of people are asking because, as you pointed out before the commercial, look, taken in total, from what we know now, from hindsight, it's clear that there were certain issues that were affecting this young man and that ultimately perhaps led to the massacre that happened here at Stoneman Douglas High School. On the other hand, it's very difficult to know in the moment from the fragments of people that we come across in our lives what one particular incident means when it comes to judging a person, which is essentially what we're asking individuals, communities to do. So let's bring in Dr. Daniel Bober. He's a forensic psychiatrist. He specializes in mental health and addiction, and he's here with us now to talk about this. You've heard me talking to my co-anchor Anne-Marie back in New York about this. You know, I struggle as somebody who considers themselves empathetic, who as a kid, you know, wore black all the time, listened to funky music that people didn't like, and people thought that I was a weird, some might even say troubled kid. But I didn't have these instances of police run-ins.
Right, and you didn't become a mass killer. So you mentioned the word hindsight. I think there's a little bit of hindsight bias here where people say, well, all the signs were there. You know, all these negative social media postings, all these traumatic experiences. But I see kids like this every day in my office, and they don't go and become mass killers. So you need to look at the totality of the circumstances because these killers are not born. They're made over time from traumatic experiences, from abuse, from neglect. So a lot of the signs were there, but I don't think anyone could have predicted that he would slaughter 17 people.
So I don't want to make this discussion about the gun issue, but I gotta ask you this because you're a doctor and you say you see kids that are troubled that come into your office every single day. If somebody is troubled, if somebody is angry and they want to take their aggression out on someone, but they don't have access to weapons, the worst that they can do is, I mean, you hear this all the time, you can grab a knife, you can grab a hammer, you can do a lot of things, you can do a lot of damage. But the accessibility to weapons, does that change the equation at all?
Certainly just the presence of firearms increases the risk of violence, of suicide, of accidents. But look at Adam Lanza, the Sandy Hook shooter. He used his mom's gun.
Right.
So my feeling is if people want to get their hands on firearms, they're going to do it. If they're hell-bent on hurting other people, they're going to find a way to do it.
So now the question is, how do we help individuals like this? What can we as a society do? You know, the early discussion in the hours after this tragedy, people said, you know, why didn't anybody say anything? Turns out a lot of people said something, and yet nothing happened. No one connected the dots. Right. What does that say about, forget him for a second, what does that say about us as a society?
I think we are so self-absorbed in our own lives that we sort of keep our heads down and mind our own business. And so now I think we really need to start thinking of, as a community, what can we do for the good of everyone and not just what am I doing for my own life? We really have to be more attuned to these signs and speak up.
It makes me think when you say that, the self-absorption that we as a society participate in, it makes me think of the Kitty Genovese story, which for or maybe our younger viewers, Kitty Genovese was a young woman who was killed in New York City back in the 60s. She was screaming and neighbors heard screams and
turned their head the other way.
And they sort of didn't call the police, blew it off because they didn't want to get involved. Now in the age of social media, where you could see a kid is posting pictures of animals that he's killed, he's done things that people find disturbing, and people are still...
He's broadcasting in his mind what's going on.
Exactly, and we are still at the level where we say, you know what, live and let live, not my business, not my kid, I don't want to get involved.
Right, and it's interesting you bring up social media because there's been a huge uptick in these instances since social media, since Columbine. With the 24-hour news cycle and social media, there's been an explosion of these types of events, and I think a lot of it has to do with the narcissism, with the desperation for fame, for recognition on social media, and sort of the copycat phenomena that we've been seeing.
And I guess the final question is, perhaps, are we putting the burden on society, which might be a very large burden? Yes, people are self-absorbed, but they've got their own lives, they've got their own children to deal with, they've got work issues, they got family issues. In the case yesterday, our John Blackstone reported on an incident where a grandmother noticed something and called the cops and probably prevented a tragedy. Should we as families be doing a little bit more? This young man is different, Nikolas Cruz, because his parents died, but I'm just talking about the larger issue here.
You know something? At the end of the day, what we're going to find out is it's very difficult to prevent these things from happening. You can look at all the signs, but you just can't really know when someone is going to go off. Yes, parents should be there for their kids. Yes, parents should have computers in a common area so kids aren't in their room sequestered away doing who knows what on the internet. But at the end of the day, we just have to try to be mindful about what's going on, but that still may not prevent it. Even when you're careful, things can still happen.
I mean, look, when I was growing up, my mom had a rule in the house: you cannot have the bedroom door closed at any time. She always wanted to be able to look in, and you can imagine for a 15, 16-year-old boy, that ain't a good thing.
Right.
But, it sort of kept me on the straight and narrow.
Right.
So, it's a question that a lot of people are going to be struggling with over the next couple of weeks.
Absolutely.
Next couple of months. Dr. Daniel Bober, thank you very much.
My
for joining
pleasure.
us.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.